Let's now shift our attention to the anticipated results of the U.S. election. After 3 years of officially announcing it, the United States has now officially withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement. The United Nations regulations refused to let Trump withdraw from the accord back in the year 2017. Remember, all these developments are happening as the U.S. awaits the results of the election. Now, remember, the Paris deal was drafted in 2015 to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change and came into force in November 2016. It also aims to keep the global temperatures from rising well below 2 degrees Celsius and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. 55 countries part of this accord are expected to take stock every 5 years to assess the collective progress. The future of America's climate change policy now hangs on the outcome of the election. President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden would undoubtedly lead the country in opposite directions. In fact, Biden, who has called climate change the existential threat to humanity, took to Twitter recently saying that the Biden administration will immediately rejoin the Paris Accord if elected to power. But even if he wins the White House, his plans to invest trillions of dollars towards making the USA greener will face a deeply divided Congress. While the electoral map appeared to tilt in Biden's favor, it seemed that the GOP will retain control of the Senate, and this would make it even more difficult for a Biden administration to shepherd a comprehensive climate bill through the upper chamber. If the Senate remains Republicans' majority, any legislation would need the consent of the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Now, the Republican Senate leader from the coal mining state of Kentucky has a long history of opposing any federal action on climate change. Nonetheless, the uncertain election outcome doesn't change the scientific reality of rising global temperatures, the burning of fossil fuels and other human activity which continues to warm the planet further at an alarming rate. The United States could miss its own Paris Accord commitment to lower carbon emissions 26% to 28% below 2005 levels by the year 2025. According to a report, the country is on track to cut its emissions between 20 and 27%, depending on how quickly the economy recovers from the coronavirus crisis. But it would need to cut emissions by 43% over the next decade to be on track to reach net zero emissions by the year 2050. This is a goal that the European Union, Japan, South Korea and other nations have set in a push to slow the world's warming. Now, senior journalist Ray Locker joined us earlier from Washington, D.C. Now that Biden has vowed to rejoin the Paris Agreement if he wins, how can this be viewed in the face of climate change? Let's listen in to his analysis.
Well, I think anybody who considers climate change a serious concern, and I think it's a majority of Americans, look upon that favorably. There was no really any kind of public demand to get out of the Paris Accord. That was something that Trump wanted to do because he doesn't like agreements like that. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of opposition to us re-entering that. You know, the major concern is if you're in an agreement like that, how does it affect American lives? Is their gasoline going to become more expensive? Or are their utility bills going to become more expensive? And what we've actually seen over the last few years is a huge increase in the use of renewable fuels, wind and solar, and a big drop in the cost of those sources of power. And I expect that to continue, and I think it would have continued under any president. Oh, I think he's obviously afraid of that. He's trying to muddy the issue to get it into the courts somehow where he thinks he has a favorable advantage in the Supreme Court. But all of these states have their own rules, the way they do things. Nothing has happened out of the ordinary. And it's important to remember in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the Republican-controlled state legislatures would not change the law to allow the counting of mail ballots early, as they do in other states like Florida. In Florida, you had almost a complete count within an hour after the polls closed. In these other states, they can only count those ballots after all the other ballots are closed. And the Republicans knew that they were going to have an advantage in election day votes, the votes cast yesterday, because those were the ones counted first. And then all of a sudden they want to stop the vote saying that the other ballots were somehow fraudulent, which is just not true. And even other Republican elected officials pushed back on the president, calling that extremely irresponsible.
Now, we also try to understand whether one can hope for a peaceful transition of power, assuming Trump loses the White House. Listen in to what Ray said.
I think it's a lot of bluster and a lot of talk. I think when push comes to shove, President Trump will leave peacefully. You know, look, he can refuse to concede. It doesn't matter. Each state certifies its vote. And after in a period in December, they all come together, and boom, they're all certified. At that point, Biden presumably is the president-elect. He can be sworn in, and if Trump doesn't want to leave the White House, you know, come noon on January 20th, 2021, Biden will be president and Trump won't be president. He will have no authority to keep people from pulling him out of the White House if it comes down to it, which I don't believe.